Thank you, thank you. Let me get situated here.
Like this.
Thank you. So what I want to talk about today, and I'm going to make it as brief and concise as I can, because I'd like to open it up for questions or comments or whatever, is to talk about motivational beliefs that underlie parental alienation. We're all familiar with the 17 behavioral strategies that Amy Baker first developed and that we all use in all of our work in parental alienation. I'm sure we can quote them upside down, and I do, and we do in our cases. But the question that gets raised to me oftentimes, and that I began to think about more heavily, is what are the motivational beliefs? What are the thought processes that parents have that are likely to lead them into parental alienation? We know what the behaviors look like, and those are really important to identify because people can understand that. You can touch them, you can feel them, and motivational beliefs are somewhat harder to deal with. And let me just say from the outset, motivational beliefs in parental alienation are hard to study because parents often have thoughts that they keep to themselves. They're secret. They don't want to reveal their true thoughts and feelings because they have the suspicion that you're trying to figure it out in a way that you will then use it against them or try to get them to change or etc. So it's not the easiest thing in the world to study, but I decided that it was worth a try. And so what I did is I went back and identified 40 alienating parents from a huge group. And those parents were identified because they manifested at least 10 of the 17 behavioral strategies that we talk about, that Baker first advanced. And so those parents got identified as an alienating parent. And these are from a pool of evaluations that were either child custody evaluations or psychological evaluations of just the parents, various different roles. So there's certainly no uniformity to it. But essentially, these 40 parents were identified. Most of them were mothers. Probably 2/3 of them were mothers, 1/3 of them were fathers. But of course, we know it's a non-gender specific problem. Mothers and fathers both do it. In this particular pool of 40, though, slightly more were mothers than fathers. And so what I did is I went back to look at content and process notes that were taken as a part of the evaluations of these 40 cases. And again, this is just a beginning attempt to do this. This is not any great science. This isn't advanced research methodology, but it is a beginning attempt to look at the issue. And so I went back and I identified verbatim quotes from records. And I presented those verbatim quotes to 2 raters who identified them as either positive, negative, or neutral. And negative would be anything that is negative towards the other parent. Okay, in a very vague way, but clearly negative. And there had to be an agreement between the 2 raters. And so that verbatim quote would be counted. If it was decided that a quote was neutral or positive, it was thrown out because that wouldn't be a part of parental alienation. It has to be negative. So I wanted to look at those verbatim quotes that were identified as negative from one parent to the other parent. And what I ended up finding was, 82 verbatim quotes that fit the criteria. And then I divided them up into essentially 6 different categories of motivational beliefs, okay? And these 6 categories ended up being vindictiveness, fear, jealousy, excessive overprotectiveness of the child, reenactment of family of origin issues, and the last one was the parent's own psychopathology. And so I divided these verbatim quotes into those 6 categories. And what I found was that 27 of them fell in the vindictiveness category, 17 fell in the fear category, 8 of them in jealousy, 14 in extreme overprotectiveness of the child, a smaller number in reenactment of family of origin issues, and a smaller number in parents' psychopathology. So if you step back and looked at it as a whole, the 3 primary categories that came through, if you looked at these verbatim quotes, was vindictiveness, fear, and excessive overprotectiveness of the child, which I think you can argue is sort of a form of enmeshment. That's the way I interpret it anyway. I want to give you a sample, though, of what some of these verbatim quotes are within each category to give you a feel for the kinds of things that were pulled out of these evaluations. Under vindictiveness, there's a quote, "He doesn't deserve to have my kids love him. He's such a devil," end quote. Another one was, quote, "She's had so many affairs. Now she thinks she can just walk away from us. It ain't happening," end quote. Under fear, one of them was, quote, "I can't live without my kids. I need them. He doesn't need them like I do," end quotes. Another one would be, "What if she picks up and leaves with my kids? She could steal them. I need my kids," end quote. Jealousy. Quote, "He thinks he's won with his new girlfriend. My kids will never care about her," end quote. Another one is, quote, "My ex's mother spends more time with my kids than I do. I can't stand her," end quote. Excessive overprotectiveness of the child. Quote, "My daughter has asthma and her father is an idiot when it comes to watching her. She could die with him," end quote. Another one is, quote, "I want my son to be homeschooled so he won't be bullied. I need to keep an eye on him. I need to protect him because his father won't," period, end quote. Reenactment of family of origin issues. Quote, "My mother left us when I was 6 years old. She ran off with her boyfriend. It's all happening again now," end quote. Another one is, quote, "I had 5 stepfathers. I wish my mother had just raised us without any of those creepy guys. 2 of them were drunks. I think my husband is a drunk just like them," end quotes. And the last one is parent psychopathology. The first one is, quote, "He's messing with the wrong person. When I get mad, I roll over everybody. I'll show him who's boss," end quote. Another one is, "I'm always nervous. The only time I'm okay is when I know my kids are home and safe. He's so dangerous. He's out to hurt all of us," end quotes. So that gives you a flavor for sort of the range of verbatim quotes that were extracted from these records. There were 82 of them, very similar to those that I placed into those different categories. So a couple of things I want to say about it. One is, if you just look at purely from a numbers standpoint, it looks like each parent that we looked at produced 2.27 motivational beliefs. In other words, it's not just one motivational belief. Oftentimes it's 2 or maybe more than that. So maybe that's why it's so complicated. And maybe that's why it's so convoluted at times, is that we're looking for sort of the silver bullet. What's the most important motivational belief? Sometimes that's true, but oftentimes I think it's a variety of things that play in together, and it makes it more difficult. The second thing I want to say is that this is just a sampling of motivational beliefs that were able to be extracted. Think how many motivational beliefs were not available. that were not verbalized, that we don't have access to, because parents won't do that very easily. Now, I guess if you spend enough time with them and you're skillful and you're patient, you can extract those kind of motivational beliefs, but it's not easy. And it does take time, and oftentimes we don't have time. So there are a lot of motivational beliefs that I don't think we accessed that are lurking and that are important to get into. I think it's important to underscore the three categories that did have the most motivational beliefs: vindictiveness, fear, and excessive overprotectiveness of children. Those are kind of the three I would have predicted, honestly, if you had asked me from a clinical standpoint, just from an experiential standpoint. But it's interesting that fear is in there, because we kind of attribute hostile, accusatory motivations to alienating parents. And I think that's true in many instances. But I think there's also a fair number of cases where fear is the operating motivational problem. Fear of losing my children, and that manifests itself in parental alienation in certain cases. So I think it's important that vindictiveness, I think we would all have predicted. Fear, we might not have predicted, but I think it's important to highlight that fear is an important motivational factor in parental alienation in a sizable number of cases. And then the last thing I want to say is I think it's important to study motivational beliefs when it comes to intervention. Like, how do we intervene? Where do we intervene? Do we intervene at the level of behavior? Do we intervene at the level of the motivational belief? We don't know that. And I think research and science can help answer that question. And I think it probably depends on the case. But I do think we know that motivational beliefs influence behavior, but we also know that behavior influences motivational beliefs. So it may be that we can intervene at one level and that will impact the other level. We just don't know enough about it to really understand it. But I think this is a good beginning to get us to focus a little more deeply about what motivates parental alienation, other than just looking at the behaviors. The behaviors are super important. They're super important to explain to parents and to attorneys and to judges, absolutely. But then the question becomes, why are these parents doing it? And this is sort of my initial descriptive attempt to tackle that issue. And I hope other people will begin to take a look at that more and more through research to try to get us a better hold of the interplay between motivational belief and behavior. All right, I'll stop there. I'll try to make it concise.